What I would like to do in the next few minutes is to give you a different way of understanding how the body works. And there's one thing for me to stand up here and talk about it, but it's a whole other thing for me to show you. So I'm wondering if anyone is here in the audience that has any pain that you'd like to get rid of. Anybody have pain? No. Here's somebody with some pain. Would you like me to help you with it? If you'll come up and go through that curtain, and you can come around this way. There you go. Go right through where he is. And one more, please. And I'd suggest those of you who are in the back, if you'd like to see better what we're doing, if you want to come up closer, it's a lot easier to see what's happening up here if you're closer to us. So, what is your name?
Carrie.
Okay, this is Carrie. Have we ever met?
No.
Nope, so we don't know each other. I don't have any idea who she is or what's wrong with her, but let's see if we can help her. So, Carrie, tell us what's going on.
I've got some pain in my arm and some weakness when I try to pick up things. A tender spot here on my elbow, and I think I may have hit it rather hard 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm not sure. I've tapped it a few times since then, and it hurts when if I hit it on the kitchen counter or something like that.
All right. So I don't know if you heard what she said. She has pain in this elbow. She's not sure if she hit it or not, but it's been bugging her for 3 weeks or so?
Yeah, 3 or 4 weeks.
So one of the things we want to know is how bad is this pain? So if 1 is I can barely feel it, and 10 is I want to shoot myself, how much pain do you have in your elbow?
Like right now, I have no pain. I have some tenderness when I try to move my arm, and if I hit it, I would say it's about a 4.
Okay, so she's not in excruciating pain or really much pain at the moment, but if she tries to move it around, or certainly if she hits it, it bothers her. So will you be able to tell if I change it?
Yes.
So she can tell if we change it. So I'm going to, tell me your name again?
Carrie.
Carrie. Carrie, I'm going to have you stand closer down here. Now, one of the things I'd like for us to do, first of all, is to look and see if her ears are on crooked. Because people who have pain usually have their ears are on crooked, and fixing that is the first thing you always want to do. So, one of the things we're going to do is just look at her, which you can see her from the front more easily than I, and look and see if you think her ears are crooked. And then secondly, I want you to look and see if her shoulders are level, and if you think she has one shoulder higher than the other. And then finally, look and see if you can see if her pelvis is rotated. Now, Carrie, I'm going to touch your ears here, if I may. And what you're going to see is that her right ear is maybe an inch lower than her left one. Let me turn you a little bit this way so these folks can see you. All right, and back over here. Can you see from that distance that she's got one ear higher than the other, that this one's significantly higher? Did you all see that? Now, the other thing I want you to notice is that this shoulder's a lot higher. You see that? So let's turn you to each portion of the crowd here so they can see. See that? Now, if I put my hands right on top of her hips like this, what you're going to see is that I have one hand higher than the other because her pelvis is rotated. Can you see that from out there? I can't see from back here, but I know whenever the ears are on crooked, the pelvis is rotated 100% of the time. Now, the other thing we'll look and see is if she can turn her head to the right and left, and how far. Now turn it the other way. So her head moves pretty well. Just a few minutes ago, I had a fellow who had a car wreck who couldn't move his head very well, and of course we fixed that. The other thing I'm going to show you is if she faces over that green curtain over there and just stands here with her eyes closed, you're going to notice she stands pretty still. Excuse me. Notice that she's not moving very much. That means her cranial sacral pump is turned off. There's a pump inside the brain and the spinal cord that normally pumps and puts fresh fluid into the nervous system, and hers isn't working. So that's another problem that she has. So what we're going to do is fix that for her. And we're going to do it with what's called a biomodulator. It's this little gadget that has an electrode on one side and the controls on the other. So Carrie, if you'll just stand back over here like this for me so I can get beside you. I'm going to just put this down in what's called automatic mode. And just look straight ahead for me. And we're going to just press here. Tell me when you feel a little tingle.
Okay.
I'm going to turn it back down. Now I'm going to hold this here for 1 minute. Every once in a while you'll feel a little prickle on the side of your neck, but it shouldn't be unpleasant. If it is, tell me so I can turn it down, okay?
Okay.
So this part is kind of like watching the grass grow. You just have to sit here for a minute. But what's happening behind the scenes is that we're putting certain frequencies into this, and this is pulsing up and down. And the frequencies that we're putting in are designed to resonate with the body, and it's going to recenter this bone here in her skull called the sphenoid bone. And when it recenters that, the brain is going to tell all of the rest of her anatomy to get back in alignment where it belongs. Because it's the position of this bone and the center of gravity of the skull that controls everything about how you stand and about whether or not that pump works. Okay, there's the minute that's gone by, so now we're going to go to the other side, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. Tell me when you can feel a little tingle.
Okay.
Going to turn it back down. And now, again, we just stand here for another minute, and then we're going to see if we've helped her get this fixed, because a lot of times painful sensations in the arms actually are coming from the neck. So you have to get this fixed first. Plus, no matter what you do for someone, you need to always fix this and turn this pump on, because when this pump is shut off, you're stuck in what's called sympathetic on mode, which means you have trouble digesting, sleeping, and healing. And so fixing this is a quick and easy way to balance out the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous systems. So we're almost done with this. That should be good. Now I'm going to ask you, Carrie, to turn your head right and left as far as it'll go. That's better than it was a while ago. Would you agree with that? Mm-hmm. Now move your shoulders around, and then rotate your back. And then watch the chair there. Just walk a little bit and come back to me. And let's see if we've made anything different for you. Perfect. So now, if you'll look at this group over here again, I'm going to touch your ears once more. Put my fingers in as far as they'll go, and you see how they're straight? Okay, let's show these people over here that your ears are not going crooked anymore. See that? Now you get the correction about 80% of the shoulders immediately. The other 20%, this shoulder will come on up tomorrow and be normal, but already her pelvis is straight. You see that? Now if she closes her eyes, go ahead and face over there, Carrie. Close your eyes and just stand there. And what you're going to see is that she begins to sway, but at this point it's going to be a sputter. So you'll see her sputtering just a little bit. There she goes, because we're just turning her pump back on, and it's been off for a while, so it sputters. If you look at her 30 minutes from now, it'll be a nice, smooth 10 times a minute, just like it should be. See her beginning to sway? That's her pump turning back on. So now then, we've got that fixed, and now it's just a matter of talking about this elbow. Can you pull this sleeve up, or I just need to get to that elbow, or take your sweater off, whichever is easier. Now, one of the interesting things about pain is that chronic pain is always defined by low voltage. And we'll be talking more about that in a minute when we get into the lecture part. But whenever the body has low voltage, it always creates a magnetic field. And wherever it's a magnetic field, it'll be sticky. So I'm just going to turn this device on, bring it up to where she can feel it. Tell me when you feel a tingle. Feel anything?
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I do.
Okay, so now she felt it. We'll turn it down just a little bit to be sure it doesn't get too hot for her. Don't want to aggravate her in any way. And then we'll just move this elbow until we find out where it's sticky. And there it is right there. So she's got some low voltage right in this spot because it sticks to her. I don't know if you can see as I go past her, it's slick and then just hangs up. Can you perceive that from the audience? So I know where she is either having pain or susceptible to pain because she has a magnetic field there. The voltage is low, so I am simply putting electrons in, and as soon as I get the voltage back up to 50 millivolts, she'll heal this, and then she won't have trouble with it anymore. So it's pretty quick and easy to fix these things and to find out where the problem is. So you can see I can find it, and they're probably, yeah, there's another one right there. So what I'm going to suggest we do, since I have only a few minutes of time to lecture to you about what I'm doing, I'm going to suggest that maybe You see the fellow in the middle back there, Charles? Charles, would you hold up your hand? If you'll go back there, either now or later, Charles will put a little bit of voltage in there, and that will allow that to heal for you, and you'll be fine.
Okay.
So can you tell any difference at all in either the elbow or in how you feel in general than you did 15 minutes ago?
I feel better in my neck. I had some stiffness in my neck as well, and so that does feel better. As far as my elbow, I can't tell yet.
Okay. So we've made her neck better, and as soon as Charles has a few minutes to treat the elbow, we'll check back in with you.
Already pressing on this bone, it's not tender like it was.
All right, she said pressing on the bone, it's not tender like it was. So what, I worked on it, what, 2 minutes? So normally I would work on it longer, but because my time with you is short and I want to try to explain some of these things that will be helpful to you, I'm going to let Charles work on you, and then we'll talk to you again. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
I've shown you what I'm going to be talking to you about so that you'll have some idea that this is not just somebody's idea, but it's something that actually works. So let's get started here. By the way, I need to tell you this. I don't know if you know this or not, but Professor Andrew Weil is a famous medical doctor out in Arizona at the medical school. Most of you know Andy Weil. Well, the FDA and the FTC sent him a letter saying he must stop telling people that taking herbs to improve their immune system will help keep them from getting the flu, or they'd put him in jail. And so then there was a professor last year who at Boston University, a dermatologist, a famous one, who said it's good for you to go out in the sun and get vitamin D, and so they fired him. And so now there are laws that are passed that are going to keep people like Sally Fallon from telling her story about food and nutrition. So the only way, and in Texas it's very difficult for MDs to talk about nutrition without losing their license. So I'm not talking to you today using my MD license. I'm talking to you today using my naturopathic license and in my role as an ecclesiastical counselor. So just for the record, I'm not talking to you as an MD today. I've done a variety of things in my life, but I'm basically trained as an ophthalmologist and practiced ophthalmology for 30 years. And I did the majority of research for the laser that's used in LASIK surgery. So I had a lot of fun doing that research, but unfortunately we didn't know at the time that the laser wouldn't kill viruses. And so when I treated some people that had viruses in their corneas, the viruses came up, went through my mask, into my nose and into my brain, and I got encephalitis. So here's how I got the encephalitis from the laser. Here's how I spent most of the next 7 years or so. I slept about 16 hours a day. I would have about 3 or 4 hours a day in which I could think clearly enough to understand a newspaper, and then like a light switch it would go off and I couldn't understand it anymore. And so during those 2 or 3 hours a day that I could think, I had to try to figure out how to get myself well. So my journey began when I got these pictures from my friend Janet, who had this lymphoma around her neck and was told by MD Anderson that nothing could be done and just to go home and die. And so instead she went to Mexico and began to get some treatment. And as you can see, 3 weeks after she began the treatments, her tumors were gone. And so when she sent me these photographs, I went down to see how they did that, and that started my journey on into integrative and natural medicine. So here's the thing. As I was sitting sick trying to figure out how to get well, I had the idea that if I could figure out how to make one cell work, I could make them all work. Because even though a brain cell and a liver cell look different, they really have the same hardware, don't they? Just like a computer, a laptop looks different than a desktop, but they're still the same hardware. It's just a matter of different software. And so I thought if I could figure out how to make one cell work, I could make them all work. And so I began to read cellular biology books, and what I discovered was that most all of the books said cells have to run in very narrow ranges of things, and particularly something that caught my attention was a narrow range of pH. Well, you can see that cells have to have a narrow range of glucose, and if that's too high, we call it diabetes, and if it's too low, we call it hypoglycemia. Cells have to run in a very narrow range of temperature, and if it's too high, we call it a fever, and if it's too low, it shows that you have hypothyroidism. You have to have a very narrow range of blood pressure, and if it's too high, we call that hypertension, and too low, hypotension. But pH and oxygen is something that doctors rarely look at unless you're in ICU. But I was particularly fascinated about the subject of pH. So let's take a look at some electronic terms. Here's the thing. pH stands for potential hydrogen, but is really, although it's about acid-base balance, it's really about voltage. The way you measure pH is you take a sophisticated voltmeter and you measure the voltage of a solution. Now there's something different about a solution than a copper wire. The copper wires that are bringing voltage into the building here are either turned on or off. So there are either electrons in those wires or not, correct? Turn the switch on, the electrons are there. You turn the switch off, they go away. But in a solution like a glass of water, you have an option. That water can either be an electron donor or it can be an electron stealer. And so that's what's different about measuring voltage in a solution, is that it has the option of being one or the other. Well, by convention, if the solution happens to be an electron donor, we put a minus sign in front of the voltage. If it happens to be an electron stealer, we put a plus sign in front of the voltage. So when you measure the voltage of a solution, if it measures plus 400 millivolts, we convert that to a logarithmic scale from 0 to 14 and call plus 400 millivolts a pH of 0, and a minus 400 millivolts, with minus meaning electron donor, is the same thing as a pH of 14. So I found it's much easier to think about what's going on by thinking in terms of voltage rather than thinking in terms of pH, right? Well, what this tells us is this. Every cellular biology book will tell you that cells are designed to run at a pH of between 7.35 and 7.45. Well, what that means is that a pH of 7.35 is the same thing as minus 20 millivolts. And what does minus mean? Electron donor, right? Minus is electron donor, right? So cells are designed to run between minus 20 millivolts and 7.45 is minus 25 millivolts. Okay, so now we got something really important, don't we? And this is one of the things I want you to take away from this meeting. Every cell in your body is designed to run between minus 20 and minus 25 millivolts. Just like your refrigerator is designed to run at 110 volts, your car is designed to run at 12 volts, your cells are designed to run at between minus 20 and minus 25 millivolts. Got it? Okay, now we're cooking. Now, let's take a look at the difference between electron stealers and electron donors. An electron stealer causes damage. It's a pH between 0 and 6.9, and we call it acidic. So when you read books that say disease is always caused by the body being acidic, it's the same thing as saying the disease is caused when the body loses its voltage. You see that? Because the word acidic is the same thing as being over in the electron stealer category. A free radical, we read about illnesses caused by free radicals. Well, free radical is simply an electron that's a mugger. It's a molecule that's a mugger. He's out looking for somebody's purse to steal, right? He's out looking for somebody's electrons to steal. So a free radical goes around stealing electrons from cell membranes and damaging them in the process. Now, electron stealers are the positive pole. They're destructive, and at the atomic level, they spin left. Now, electron donors, on the other hand, can do work. It's a pH of 7.1 to 14, and we call that alkaline. So when you read books like Alkalize or Die, we're saying if you don't have voltage, you're going to die. You see that? It's the same thing. It's a synonym. So acidic means that you're in electron stealer status. Alkaline means you're in electron donor status. And that's the important thing. Antioxidants. Antioxidants are molecules that are very charitable. They're looking for somebody to give their money away to, namely their electrons. So when your mother says to you, eat your vegetables, they're good for you, she's saying, eat your vegetables, they have voltage in them and you need that. You see that? They're the negative pole, they're constructive, and they spin right. When you see this slide, you might ask the question, didn't anybody ever teach you not to put so many numbers on one slide? Well, I did it on purpose because I wanted to see you to have the ability to see the conversion of one number to another. But basically what I want you to get off this slide is this. Here's a minus 20 millivolts, which is the same thing as a cell pH of 7.35. Here's a minus 25, which is 7.44. Now the colors that are on this chart are the same as pH strips. So if you go down to the health food store or to the pool supply and get a pH strip and measure your saliva, these colors correspond to that. So you can see there's quite a bit of change in voltage with just one change in the color on your strip, isn't there? Now here's the second part of the thing I want you to know. We heal primarily by making new cells. You make new cells very rapidly. The rods and cones in your eye right now are only 48 hours old. The skin you're sitting in is just 6 weeks old. Your liver's 8 weeks old. Your nervous system's 8 months old, and your bones are a year old. So every year we completely change ourselves. And so we're rapidly making new cells to completely replace ourselves. But here's the thing. To make a new cell requires minus 50 millivolts. So which has more electrons, minus 25 or minus 50? Minus 50 does. Even though it's numerically a smaller number, it still has more horsepower, more electrons than minus 20. So healing requires minus 50. Now here's the problem. When your voltage begins to drop below operating voltage, at a minus 15 millivolts you're tired, at a minus 10 millivolts you get sick, at a minus 5 millivolts things quit working, and as voltage continues to go past zero, where we change polarity, now we're in cancer territory. All cancer occurs at plus 30 millivolts. And plus is what? Electron stealer, right? So there's everything from tired to cancer, and it's all about the voltage, you see? So obviously, no matter what's wrong with you, we need to put enough electrons in to push the voltage back up, not just to operating voltage, but to have enough voltage to make a new cell if you're going to heal. Because anytime you're down here and you don't put electrons in, you can't make new cells. If you can't make new cells, you can't get well. You see that? Now, there are several bad things that happen when voltage changes. When you're down here and voltage begins to drop, the first thing that happens is chronic pain. So chronic pain is simply a symptom of low voltage. Chronic pain is simply a symptom of low voltage. So if you have pain, how are you going to fix it? It's easy. Put in electrons and get it back up to healing voltage, and it gets well. So another bad thing that happens is that as voltage drops, oxygen levels drop. So if I took a glass of water and set it here and I put a tube in it and I began to bubble oxygen into that water, then the amount of oxygen that will dissolve in that water is dictated by the voltage of the water. So if I raise the voltage of the water, more oxygen will dissolve. However, if I lower the voltage of the water, oxygen actually comes out of solution and disappears. Well, our cells are 70% oxygen. What that means then is that as voltage in a cell begins to drop, oxygen comes out of the cell and you end up with a cell that has inadequate amounts of oxygen. Now, one of the problems with having inadequate amounts of oxygen has to do with our metabolism. For every unit of fat that you put into what's called the Krebs cycle, out the other end you get 38 molecules of what's called ATP, which is a rechargeable battery that's used in enzymatic functions. So 1 to 38 if oxygen is available. However, if oxygen is not available, for every unit of fat you put into the Krebs cycle, you only get 2 molecules of ATP out. So that's like having a car that goes from 38 miles to the gallon to 2 miles to the gallon. You see the problem? If your cells are running at 2 miles to the gallon, how in the world are they going to get enough energy to do their job? They aren't. And therefore you get sick. Now, there's another problem that happens, and that is that each of us contain perhaps 1 trillion bugs. Now, these bugs are asleep as long as oxygen is around because they can't function if oxygen is available. However, as soon as our oxygen levels drop, the bugs wake up. And guess what the first thing they want to do is? They want to have lunch. And they want to have you for lunch. So, when these bugs wake up and want to have lunch, they don't have teeth, do they, to take a bite out of your cell. So they put out digestive enzymes to dissolve the cell so they can get the nutrients out of it. Now, when they're putting those digestive enzymes out, they don't just stay locally. They get in your bloodstream and go other places. So for example, let's say I have strep throat. So I've got a strep bacteria up here having lunch on my tonsil. I'm not too happy about it because his having lunch on my tonsil means my throat hurts like the devil, doesn't it? But we all know that if you have strep having lunch on your tonsil, that those digestive enzymes can get into the bloodstream and go down and scar your heart valves, right? They can also go down and scar your joints, right? Well, that same process is happening throughout the body. So wherever you have low voltage, the bugs that are there having lunch are putting out toxins that are harming you in other parts of your body. So for example, if I have low voltage in my gallbladder, then the toxins that from the bugs that are having lunch on my gallbladder are damaging my brain. If I have bugs in my sinus, they may be damaging my intestine. If I have bugs in my intestine, they may be damaging something else, you see? So no matter what's going on, wherever you have bugs happening, it affects you throughout your whole body. So the point I'm trying to make is that every time voltage drops, you get chronic pain, you get a lack of oxygen, you get inefficient metabolism, and you have bugs having lunch. When you understand what I just told you, you understand essentially all of chronic disease, and you understand why it's not a good idea to go and treat just one thing. For example, if you take antibiotics to get rid of those bugs, well, you may suppress them shortly, but what's going to happen as soon as you get off the antibiotics, if the voltages and the oxygen are still low, they're going to come right back, aren't they? And so you have to deal with what caused it in the first place, and what caused it in the first place was low voltage. You see that? Next slide, please. Oh, let me go back to that slide. There's one thing I want to say because it fits in with some of the conversations that you've heard this weekend. As voltage drops, the different kinds of bugs change from one kind to another. So we start off with viruses, and then we get round bacteria, and then we get oval bacteria, and then we get rod-shaped bacteria, and then we get yeast, and finally we get fungus that has the little hyphae. Now, I know that Dr. Kaufman's been talking to you about the role of fungus in cancer, right? Guess what allows the fungus to grow? Lack of voltage, lack of oxygen. So we cannot have fungal infections. For example, you cannot have candida if your voltage is normal. Can't happen. So if you have candida and you want to get rid of it, what do? Fix the voltage. You see that? So this whole business about our sliding downhill into cancer and that cancer is a fungus, I agree with all of that about cancer being caused by a fungus. But the only thing that allowed the fungus to cause your cancer was what? Lack of voltage. You see that? So you don't have to worry about all the fungus in the world as long as your voltage is normal. Okay, next slide. So here's the thing. What's the voltage in my thumb here? Minus 20 millivolts, right? Now I hit it with a hammer. Ah! Now the voltage in my thumb immediately goes to what? Minus 50. And it goes to minus 50 because it has to make new cells to replace those that I just smashed with a hammer. So at minus 50 millivolts, one of the things that automatically happens is that the blood vessels dilate. And the reason they dilate is that you need new raw materials to make new cells. And so those vessels have to dilate so they can dump proteins and carbohydrates and fats and vitamins and all that stuff into the neighborhood so you can start making new cells. You see that? So at minus 50 millivolts, when healing is going on, you always have a throbbing pain, it's swollen, it's warm, it's red, and it doesn't work very well. But that's the price you pay because you have to get all the raw materials there. Now, as soon as I finish making new cells and replace all of those I smashed with a hammer, my thumb's going to go back to minus 25 millivolts. It's going to be pink, it feels fine, works fine, and I'm a happy camper. You see that? Now here's another scenario. I'm up here at minus 50 millivolts, happily making new cells, and then I run out of voltage. All of a sudden my voltage drops down to, say, minus 10. Now I've got a big problem, don't I? Because in order to get my thumb well, I have to make new cells to replace those I smashed with a hammer. But I can't make new cells unless I have what? Minus 50 millivolts. And the raw materials necessary to make a new cell. Well, I'm down at minus 10. I ran out of juice. So I'm stuck in chronic disease. So at minus 10 in my thumb, you can do all the surgery you want on it. You can give me all the pills you want. But until I can put in enough electrons to get me back to minus 50, I'm stuck in chronic disease. You see that? So that's the magic thing that I want you to take away from today, is this. Chronic disease is always defined as by having low voltage. Getting well always happens when you figure out a way to put in electrons. So everything that works, whether you're talking about my biomodulator, whether you're talking about homeopathic remedies, essential oils, anything, swimming with the dolphins, you know, hugging dogs, all those things that help you get well, do so by providing electrons. Because if you don't get electrons, they don't work. Now you have a way to go around the booth and understand what everybody's telling you out there about why you should take their stuff. All you need to know is how many electrons are in that. Then you know how good it is. In fact, you can take a voltmeter that you buy at Radio Shack and go down to the grocery store, measure the voltage in this green bean and in this batch of green beans and know which one's the best because of which one has the most voltage in it. You see that? Okay. So what you see then, if you understand what I just told you about my thumb, you understand why you're sick if you are, and you understand how to get well. So we can measure your voltage, which is the beauty of all of this, and we can do this with a biomodulator as you can put it into voltmeter mode and simply go measure and read what the voltage is, and then you know what you're dealing with, and then you switch it into treatment mode and it puts electrons back in, and that's how you get well. So chronic disease is always low voltage with pain and cells that don't have enough voltage to do their job. Cells can't get rid of waste products and become toxic. Microorganisms grow and release toxins. And that when you finally get down to plus 30, fungus takes over your cell and you have cancer. Now, whenever you have chronic disease, one of the questions you need to ask is, why did my voltage drop enough to allow me to get sick? Right? Because if I take and just put voltage in and get that part to heal, if you don't figure out what caused it to drop in the first place, it may very well drop again. You see that? Well, first of all, as far as measuring is concerned, this is Dr. Langevin, who's at the medical school up in Vermont. And what she and her group showed us is that the acupuncture meridians are simply the fascial planes in the body. And let me explain that a little better. The tissue in the body that has the least resistance to the flow of electrons is fibrous tissue. So wherever you have fibrous tissue in your body, it's doing two things. One is it's structural, and second is it's moving electrons around. So the fascia are simply the fibrous sheaths around all of our muscles and around all of our organs. And those fibrous sheaths are the acupuncture system, and we can tap into those and treat them as a fibrous wire. So I can, for example, if I want to know what the voltage is in my brain, I can just go right here to this acupuncture point and measure it. Neat, huh? So if you'll just go through this series of slides for us, what you're going to see is that here are all the acupuncture meridians, and these are the actual wires from anatomical dissections. One of the things that you need to realize is that our muscles are both electron generators and are rechargeable batteries. Now, a thing called a piezoelectric crystal is simply, for example, if you take a piece of quartz crystal and you squeeze it with a pair of pliers, it emits electrons. That's called the piezoelectric effect. Well, your muscles are piezoelectric. So I'm just sitting here generating electrons by simply moving my muscle, all right? So muscles are electron generators. The other interesting thing about muscles is they're also rechargeable batteries. So one of the reasons that exercise is so important is that it not only generates but stores voltage for your body to work. So one of the ways you treat yourself is to exercise, and you all know that, right? You just didn't know how it was working. Now you do. Next slide. Now, we're wired up in a way that we have a main cable going up our back and another main cable going down the front. You see that? That cable is like the wire that comes from the telephone pole to your garage at your home. All right, next slide. And then we have power terminals on that main cable to supply the voltage to all the organs in that region, just like you have a different power station in Tyler and a different one in Terrell and a different one in every city around here. So it is with your body. So you have a different power terminal for every region of your body. Next slide. So here you see the power terminals. There's a terminal for our skull, one in front and one in back. There's a terminal for our neck and upper chest, here and here. There's a terminal for our chest, here and here. There's a terminal for our belly, and there's a terminal for our pelvis. Let's say that you have trouble with your heart. What you automatically know is that the voltage in your heart is low, and if it's low, that this terminal right here is going to be low voltage. So if you want to make your heart work better, where do you think a good place to insert some electrons might be? Right there, right? Let's say you have trouble thinking, or you had an accident and you drowned, or you had a traumatic head injury in a car wreck, and your brain's not working the way it should be. Where do you think you're going to have low voltage? Here and here. And what might you do to make that better? You put voltage in there. And how do I know that works? Well, I've happened to be fortunate enough to wake several people up out of comas. For example, I was driving down to Austin to give a lecture similar to this, and I got a call that there's a little girl in San Antonio, a 5-year-old, who had drowned or was near drowning and was in ICU. Would I come see her? So I went down to see her, and the pediatrician at the ICU was trying to get them to pull the plug. And I said, well, let's go see what's going on. Well, there are 3 wires, 3 acupuncture meridians, all coming into that terminal that bring voltage to the brain. So I went in and measured these places, and only one of the 3 wires had low voltage. So I simply left my biomodulator there. We put a patch on each side, turned the device on, and let it run. And in about 3 days, she woke up. How did I know she'd wake up? It's all about the voltage. You see that? It's so easy to see what to do once you understand how the body works. So whatever's wrong with you, you can look at this chart and know which one of these terminals to go look at and then to treat. And then there are lateral terminals over from them where it goes to the right side and the left side of the body. Well, my time for this morning is up. What I'm going to talk to you if you come back and visit with me at 5:30 is this. There are 2, if every one of those things measures low voltage, no matter what your blood tests show, you're hypothyroid until proven otherwise. And because thyroid hormone controls total body voltage, and because fluoride and soy inactivate thyroid function, almost everybody in this room is hypothyroid, even though you have normal blood tests. So I'm going to explain all that to you and tell you how important it is to getting over chronic disease to fix your thyroid, because it controls your total body voltage. Second thing I'm going to talk to you about is that if you have only one circuit out, everything's fine except you just got one circuit, say my heart's not working. Almost always that's a dental infection, and I'm going to explain to you how that works and what you have to do to fix it. Third is I'm going to tell you that almost all allergies and part of your total body voltage is controlled by your stomach acid. And so we're going to talk about those things this afternoon at 5:30. So I hope you had fun in the last few minutes. I did. We'll talk to you later. Now, there are several bad things that happen when voltage drops below 20. One of the things happens is that things begin to hurt. So when your voltage is low, you simply hurt all the time. And so pain is simply a symptom of low voltage. So if you have pain, you automatically know that the thing has low voltage. You don't need to do any fancy tests. You just know it, because that's the way it works. If you have pain, you have the low voltage. Another thing that's bad about having low voltage is that it controls the level of oxygen that's available. So if I take a glass of water and I put a tube in it and I start bubbling oxygen into that water, the amount of oxygen that will dissolve in the water is dictated by the voltage of the water. So if the voltage is higher, more oxygen goes into solution. But if the voltage drops, oxygen comes out of solution and leaves the water. Well, our cells are 70% water. So when the voltage in a cell begins to drop, the oxygen comes out of the cell, and now the cell has to get by with an adequate amount of oxygen. Well, that creates a couple of other problems. One of them has to do with metabolism. We have a system inside the cells that generates the energy for the cells to do their work. So insert fat into one side of what's called the Krebs cycle, and what comes out the other side is a rechargeable battery called ATP. And ATP provides the electrons necessary for all the enzymes and so forth for your cell to do whatever it needs to do. So, and then ATP discharges into a discharged rechargeable battery called ADP. Well, the point that I'm making is that when you put fat into the Krebs cycle and you have oxygen available, you get 38 molecules of ATP out the other side, lots of energy. However, if oxygen is not available, for every unit of fat you put in, you only get 2 molecules of ATP. So when oxygen levels drop, you go from 38 miles to the gallon to 2 miles to the gallon, so to speak. Well, when you're running at 2 miles a gallon, it's hard for the cell to have enough energy to do its job, isn't it? Another problem that happens is that each of us contain perhaps as many as 1 trillion bugs, and those bugs are asleep as long as oxygen is available. However, if oxygen becomes unavailable, the oxygen levels drop, those bugs wake up, and when they wake up they want to have lunch, and if they want to have you for lunch. And so since they don't have teeth to bite into your cells, they put out digestive enzymes so they can dissolve your cells and get the nutrients out of them. So one of the problems is that those bugs having lunch not only are damaging the tissue right around them, but those enzymes get in our bloodstream and go to distant places and damage cells there as well. So, for example, if I have strep throat, I've got a strep bacteria having lunch on my tonsil. Now, to me, when he's having lunch, I'm kind of annoyed about it because it hurts like crazy, right? I got a strep throat. Well, we all know that the enzymes that the strep puts out while it's having a picnic on my tonsil can get in my bloodstream and go down and scar my heart valves, right? Call that rheumatic heart disease. It comes from strep bugs having lunch on your tonsil. Those same things can go down and damage my knees as well, rheumatic arthritis. Well, the same process goes on throughout the body. So I may have low voltage in my gallbladder, and the bugs that are in there having lunch on the gallbladder put out toxins that commonly damage the brain. So the reason my brain isn't working very well be because I got low voltage in my gallbladder. You see how that works? So whenever you hear somebody say you have an autoimmune disease, well, I don't believe there is such a thing as an autoimmune disease. I think it's just bugs having lunch and these enzymes going someplace causing damage, and when we go biopsy that area, we see damage, we see inflammatory cells, but we can't culture anything there, so we say, oh, the body's attacking itself. No, the body's not attacking itself. These enzymes that the bugs are putting out are attacking it. And one of the reasons I can say that with some confidence is I've taken a fair number of people that have a lupus with a high blood test called ANA, which diagnoses lupus. You go in and raise the voltage, kill the bugs, and the ANA goes back to normal, and the people get well. So it's my belief then that these things we call autoimmune diseases are simply low voltage, low oxygen, bugs having lunch, enzymes going places and causing grief. So then, of course, if voltage gets low enough, then one of the bugs that begins to grow are fungal bugs, which you can actually see in the blood with a phase contrast or dark field microscope, and then those fungal forms begin to take over the cell, and now you have a tumor, and that occurs at plus 30 millivolts. So basically the point is then that chronic disease is always defined by low voltage. Okay? If you got chronic disease, you got low voltage. So that brings up some more questions. How do we measure the voltage? Well, Dr. Langevin, who's at the medical school in Vermont, showed that the acupuncture system is simply the fascial planes in the body. Then go down and go around every organ, and then from that capsule there's a fiber that goes down to every little group of cells. So this fibrous network, which we know as fascia, is the same thing as the acupuncture system. So you can tap into that and measure what's going on with any of the deep organs. And this is basically Langevins' work here, and you can see here's the classical lung and large intestine meridians, and here are the actual wires in your arms. We have another system as well. There's a sheath around every nerve, which Dr. Becker named the analog perineural nervous system. And so that fiber sheath around all the nerves is the second wiring system that also carries voltage wherever we go. So all cells basically have a fail-safe system, two wires going to it, the acupuncture system and the perineural system, so if one of them gets cut or damaged, the other one's still working. It's a pretty smart guy that designed this system we call the human, right? Well, we use primarily the acupuncture system. Now, one of the things that's important about this system and that ties into it is the fact that all of our muscles are both electron generators and electron storage rechargeable batteries. A piezoelectric crystal is simply if you take a quartz crystal and squeeze it with a pair of pliers, it'll emit electrons. Well, your muscles do the same thing, so I'm now generating electrons. Well, the neat thing about not only generate them is that my muscles are rechargeable batteries, so they store those same electrons. So this is basically the way we are, and one of the reasons exercise is so great for us. Not only does it move around the lymphatic, but it creates and stores voltage for us to use. Then we talked about the fact there's a main cable that goes up the back and down the front of the body, and that's like the wire that comes from the telephone pole to the garage at your house. That's the main power cable. And then on each one of those we have a terminal here for each region of the body. So we have one for the skull, one for the neck and upper chest, one for the chest, one for the belly, and one for the pelvis. So if you have an illness in one of those areas, you know, in whatever area that is bothering you, then you can go and you'll indeed find that that particular terminal has low voltage. So if you insert electrons into that area, it will provide electrons to whatever's wrong. You know, whatever is chronically ill has low voltage, and so you want to put some electrons in there, and that's the port through which you can easily do it. Why did my voltage drop enough to allow me to get sick in the first place? Right? Because if I go out to my car and the battery's dead, and I put a battery charger on it and charge it back up, but I don't remember to turn the dome light off, my battery's going to be dead the next morning too, isn't it? Well, the same thing true in the body. If I don't figure out why my voltage dropped in the first place, even though I go fix it, it's going to be a problem again. And so we need to look and see what other things are causing the problem. Now, one of the things that's different about patients is that you can divide them into two groups, those that have normal total body voltage and those that don't. So I may have, if I measure these circuits, they may all be normal, but maybe this one, and I have a heart problem. Okay, but the rest of my circuits are all normal. Well, then that's pretty easy. All I got to do is go fix the power in that single circuit, and I'm done. But what if I measure every one of these and every one of them is low? If every one of them is low, if the total body voltage is low, then that's hypothyroidism until proven otherwise. So because thyroid hormone controls both body temperature and body voltage. So I want to talk to you about thyroid function, because most of the people in this room are hypothyroid and don't know it. Now, there's this thing called metabolic syndrome X that has become the buzzword in medicine, and it has these four features. You have high blood pressure, apple-shaped obesity, type 2 diabetes, and increased blood fats, particularly cholesterol. So this has come to be known as metabolic syndrome X because you have four things. Well, in traditional medicine, we don't really understand why people get this, so we give you pills to lower that, pills to lower that, pills to lower that, and put a band around your stomach for that. But we really didn't fix it, did we? Metabolic syndrome X is primarily a function of type 2 hypothyroidism, which is epidemic in our country. So to talk about the hypothyroidism, I need to first talk about iodine. Now, the important thing to know is that when you give the body iodine, the thyroid gets first dibs on it, but often that's still not enough for the thyroid to function normally. But here's the deal. Every organ in the body that secretes something needs large amounts of iodine to function normally. Okay? Now, if you look at this list, and this is just a partial list, you'll see that many people have problem in these areas. Particularly, you know, women have trouble with breasts and ovaries, and men with prostates and so forth. But these are where people get cancer, isn't it? We get cancer in organs that secrete something. Now, the Japanese, who consume large amounts of iodine, have the lowest incidence of cancer of anybody on the planet. They do have lots of stomach cancer, and that's primarily because iodine is neutralized by the nitrates in the meats that they eat. But what you see is then that everybody needs lots of iodine for things to work correctly. Now, iodine will kill any single-celled organism. There isn't any bug that iodine won't kill, and the bugs can never become resistant to it, which is a neat thing. But liquid iodine is a problem in the sense that iodine doesn't like to go into solution with water. So Dr. Lugol figured out that if you put potassium iodide in water, then the iodine will go into solution. So water-based iodine is generally called a Lugol solution. If you put it in alcohol, it's called tincture of iodine, which is what most of us in this room grew up buying at the drugstore and putting on cuts, right? So when you're taking iodine for the body, you don't want the alcohol, so you want to get it from Lugol's solution. Now, when you have adequate amounts of iodine in the body will put 30 times as much iodine in the parts of the body exposed to the outside world as it does in the blood. So basically, you're encased in a shield of iodine. So why would the body want to do that? Keeps you from getting infections, right? So that's your first line of defense in your immune system, is to have a shield of iodine in every part of the body exposed to the outside world. Now, if a bug gets past that shield, then the white blood cells will go get the bug and try to kill it by making either ozone or peroxide. So your white blood cells kill with ozone. Now, you can get a dehydrated Lugol solution. Namely, they take the water out of it and just put it into pills. These are two common brands, Ithroid, Ioderol, and I find there are 2 or 3 other people who have come into the market recently with these as well. So let's go on now that we've gotten past iodine and talk a little bit about type 2 hypothyroidism. And I encourage you to get Mark Starr's book, Hypothyroidism Type 2, because it's a well-written book and explains in much greater detail what I'm about to tell you. Now, up to 90% of the American population has undiagnosed hypothyroidism. And the reason is that we docs are trained to look primarily at blood tests. The pituitary gland produces thyroid stimulating hormone, and that causes the thyroid gland to put out a hormone called T4. So we docs tend to look at those, particularly this one, and if it comes back normal, we tell you that your thyroid's working just fine. But that's just part of the story, because T4 has to be converted to the active form of T3. So you can have normal TSH and normal T4, but if you can't convert it to T3, you're still hypothyroid. Now, the conversion from T4 to T3 requires iodine, selenium, zinc, iron, progesterone, cortisol, and glutathione. And if you're missing one of these guys, you make a fake hormone called reverse T3 or RT3. The problem with RT3 is it fits in the keyhole, but it won't turn the key, you see? But it takes up the spot, so T3 can't get there either. Well, many people, as I told you, the majority of the U.S. population is iodine deficient. The only people in the U.S. who aren't iodine deficient are those that eat seaweed every day. So everybody else is iodine deficient because you need about 1,000 times what you get out of salt to be healthy. So most people don't have iodine. Many are deficient in zinc and many in iron, and of course a lot of people are often deficient in glutathione. So many people have normal blood tests but are still not able to make T3. Now, another reason for being hypothyroid, and that is thyroid hormone is made with iodine, and iodine is a halogen, and the other halogens are fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, and astatine. Here they are in the periodic table. The problem is that fluorine here is a bully. So anytime there's an atom of fluorine and an atom of any of these other guys in the same neighborhood, fluorine pushes them out of the way and takes their place. So here's T4, a protein with 4 iodines on it, but when you consume fluoride, you get this guy. The problem is that the blood test can't tell the difference between these two, but this one doesn't work. So every time you consume fluoride, which you do when you drink water, brush your teeth, go to the dentist, and they lather fluoride in your mouth. Soy contains large amounts of fluoride, et cetera, et cetera. There are lots of sources of fluoride in our environment, unfortunately. And we end up with all this fake hormone. So you go to your doc and say, "Doc, I feel terrible. I'm tired all the time. My hair's falling out. My skin is dry. I'm constipated. I have no interest in sex anymore. My GI system's a mess," and on and on and on. And he said, "Well, there's nothing wrong with you because your blood tests are all normal. Go home." Right?
Yeah.
That's the way it works. Well, it's because the blood test missed this. You see that? Here's what a normal thyroid gland looks like, and this is what fluoride does to it. So even if you take iodine, people say to me, "I'm just going to take lots of iodine and then my thyroid will start working again." Well, this thyroid gland has problems making thyroid hormone even if you got iodine because it's too bad, too far gone. The fluoride's destroyed it. So basically, by the way, there are several things besides fluoride that will take down your thyroid function. High above those is soy, but also petrochemicals, fuel exhausts, hormones in meat and chicken, plastics. If you take a bottle of water and you leave it out in your car and then you go out after it's been hot and you drink it, you can taste the plastic. Well, that stuff you're tasting in there is shutting down your entire endocrine system, including your thyroid. Sodium lauryl sulfate is what's in your toothpaste. That's why, did you know there's a poison control marker on toothpaste? Look at it when you get home if you didn't know that. It's because of sodium lauryl sulfate. And they put it in there so it'll bubble because they sell more of it if it bubbles when you brush your teeth. Herbicides, pesticides, and so forth, all of those things shut down thyroid function. Now, remember that I told you that T3 controls body temperature. 40% of T3 is used to keep your body temperature normal. 60% is used to control your body voltage. So since we can't really rely on blood tests to tell us what's going on, we rely primarily on body temperature and body voltage to tell us if you're hypothyroid. So what you want to do is put a thermometer at your bedside, and when you wake up in the morning you throw the covers off and you wait about 4 minutes to get used to not being covered up, and then you take your temperature. Don't do it in the mouth because dental infections and sinus infections will make that number artificially high. Do it in your armpit, or my preference is to get what's called an exergen temporal artery thermometer, and they tell you to run it across your forehead. I prefer to just put it right behind your ear. You're measuring the blood coming right out of the heart through this artery, and you don't have sweat glands behind your ear. Did you know that? So there are no sweat glands there to artificially lower it. So just put it right there, take your temperature. If it's below 97.6, you're hypothyroid. Easy, right? So each of you should do that tomorrow.
97.6.
Yeah, it's basically a degree less than what it should be in the middle of the day. 98.6 is normal in the middle of the day. If it's below 97.6 when you first wake up, you're hypothyroid. The normal range is 97.6 to 98.2. So if you wake up in the morning and it's above 98.2, then you should check your temperature again a week or so later, because you may just have a little fever that was artificially bringing it up. But if you're tired all the time and have all the symptoms I was talking about also, and or all your voltages are low, you need to be measuring your temperature. Now, when you're hypothyroid, your body makes a goo called mucin. And mucin is a little bit like clear Karo syrup. So your body begins to fill up with mucin. And so all of a sudden, you say, boy, I'm getting fatter all the time, and there's nothing, I just can't get rid of all this fat. Well, oftentimes it's not fat, it's mucin. One of the ways to know is if you should be, you know how you can pinch your skin like this on your wrist? And you can pretty much put skin to skin. You should be able to do that over this muscle. And if you have significant bulk between your fingers over that muscle, that's mucin. And so that's another sign of hypothyroidism. Another one is to look at the moons. You know the little moons on your fingernails? Those moons are showing you both thyroid and adrenals. If you don't have any moons, both your thyroid and your adrenals are shot. Okay? So, by the way, even young babies are born hypothyroid. If mama's hypothyroid and full of fluoride and soy, if mama eats lots of soy, her baby will be hypothyroid when it's born. So even these cute fat-cheeked babies are often hypothyroid. Now, when your body is full of mucin, then your blood pressure goes up, trying to push blood through all of that Karo syrup that you're filled up with. So your blood pressure goes up. But if your adrenals fail, then your blood pressure goes down, so that your blood pressure becomes too low. So too high a blood pressure is usually hypothyroid. Too low of blood pressure is usually adrenal failure. Now, the mucin surrounds the cell membrane and makes it harder for insulin to get to the cell membrane and act, so oftentimes your blood sugar goes up, and so you become diabetic. And you deposit a lot of the mucin into your belly, and so you begin to get this beer belly effect. And of course, we just described most of metabolic syndrome X. The other thing, part of metabolic syndrome X is high cholesterol. Now, all of your hormones are made from cholesterol. So when the liver looks around and says, we don't have enough hormones, I'm going to make some cholesterol so you guys can go back to work. So a high cholesterol is simply a symptom of you having inadequate hormones. Did you know that? And the main reason you have inadequate hormones is that you don't have thyroid, because your endocrine system can't function if your thyroid's not working. And of course, if you're also consuming soy, and if also your body's full of mercury, then your endocrine glands won't work, and you can't have enough, they can't make hormones, and so your cholesterol continues to be elevated. So an elevated cholesterol is simply a response of the liver whenever you don't have enough hormones. Okay, so when you're hypothyroid, you feel like you need a little spark, and that's why Starbucks is so popular. People can't get going in the morning without their caffeine fix and sugar fix, and that's why so many of our kids are, and even our adults, are drinking these so-called power drinks, or whatever you call them, these kind of Red Bull kind of things that are causing our kids to have seizures and kidney failure and other problems, because they're consuming such huge amounts of caffeine and sugar. Okay, so the point is that if your total body voltage is low, you should assume that that's hypothyroidism until proven otherwise, and then you must go fix it. Most of the time, people who are hypothyroid will have to go on to thyroid medication in addition to the iodine and the things, all that list of things I gave you that makes it convert. So most of the time you have to end up finding a physician who will understand this and give you a prescription for thyroid hormones so that you can get your thyroid working again. Now, there's another reason that people can have low total body voltage, and that is because they don't have enough stomach acid. So let's see how that works. To make stomach acid requires our old friend iodine, because guess what? The stomach secretes something. Everything that secretes something needs iodine, right? It has to have sodium chloride, salt, CO2, water, and vitamin B1. So if you have those things, you can make stomach acid. If you don't have one of them, you can't. Now, the way things are supposed to work is this. The human body is designed to never absorb proteins. It's only supposed to absorb amino acids. And I think most of you know, you take a bunch of amino acids and you put them together, and that's called a protein. So a protein is made up of amino acids. Well, you should never absorb proteins, because if I absorb a protein and I didn't make it, my immune system looks and says, that's not me, and so it develops antibodies and attacks it. You see that? So the way the system's supposed to work is that when you consume protein, you make stomach acid. The stomach acid tears that protein down into amino acids, and then it goes downstream, and the amino acids are absorbed, and then your body reassembles them as you. And that way you don't get allergies to these proteins. But if you don't have stomach acid, when the proteins go downstream and not be digested, and then they're absorbed, then the body builds antibodies, and then you are allergic to the things that you regularly eat. So every time you eat and you absorb some of these proteins, you have a mini flu shortly after your meal, because your immune system's attacking those proteins you just ate. You see that? So most of the allergies people have are because they didn't have stomach acid. But there's another problem with not having stomach acid. When you make stomach acid, the wall of the stomach puts hydrochloric acid into the stomach and puts sodium bicarbonate out into the blood. Sodium bicarbonate, of course, is an electron donor. Hydrochloric acid is an electron stealer. But so basically we put electrons out into the bloodstream every time we make stomach acid. The stomach generally gets down to a pH of about 2 if things are working correctly. And then it comes on downstream, and then once this pH of 2 stuff starts pouring into the small intestine, it has to quickly neutralize it, because the small intestine's not going to put up with that kind of acid, is it? And so the pancreas quickly puts sodium bicarbonate into the small intestine to neutralize that stomach acid coming down. Well, in order to put bicarbonate into the gut, it has to put hydrochloric acid back into the blood. Well, that's all right, as long as this electron donor got put in before you put this electron stealer in. But if you don't have stomach acid, you didn't put this up here, you only put this one in here, and thus you put all these electron stealers in here, it drops your body voltage. You see how that works? So one of the reasons that people have low total body voltage is they don't have stomach acid. And why don't they have stomach acid? They don't have iodine and B1. Or they're taking the notorious purple pill, right? Prilosec or Zantac or whatever, right? Those things are terrible because they are causing you to become allergic to your foods. They're causing you to have all of this immune response every time you eat, and they're making your total body voltage drop. Did I explain that well enough? So it's very, very important for you to have adequate stomach acid. So while you're building up your body, restoring the iodine, and being sure you have enough B1, you need to be taking a pill called betaine, B-E-T-A-I-N-E, which causes the stomach to secrete stomach acid, and you can get those at the health food store. So you should take a betaine pill with every meal, certainly any meal that has protein in it, for several months until your system gets where it can do it on its own, and because the main reason you can't make stomach acid is you don't have iodine. All right? You're beginning to see how important iodine is? People think, oh, iodine. I have a real problem in my practice. I put people on, everybody comes in, I put them on iodine, they'll take it for one bottle and then they quit. Well, that's not going to do it, is it? Because you have to have iodine forever. So once they get through with that bottle and they quit taking it, now they quit making stomach acid and they're right back into this old system again. And so even if they avoid the foods that they're allergic to, they're going to get allergic to the new foods because they're still not making stomach acid. So they're going to get allergic to those because they can't digest them either. Any questions about how the stomach works with this? Okay. Now I need to talk to you about dental problems. When a person comes in and their total body voltage is low, that's almost always what? Hypothyroidism or stomach acid. If they come in and their total body voltage is normal, but they have 1 or 2 circuits that are out, they've got 1 or 2 illnesses, they got colitis, they got heart disease, their brain doesn't work, they got something or other, that's almost always a dental problem. Okay? And here's how that works. First of all, let me just show you a little bit of this movie. I didn't hook up we won't worry about the sound. I can just show you what we're showing in this movie is that I don't know if these lights can come down any or not. Aaron, will you look and see if maybe we can shut them down? But basically, this is a mercury filling in a tooth, and it has a phosphorescent screen around it, behind it, and what you can see is all this mercury vapors coming off of it. See it? And so this happens when you have a mercury filling. That happens every time you raise the temperature in your mouth, like drinking a cup of coffee. It happens every time you brush it. So whenever you brush your teeth in the morning, you've got all this mercury coming off of it. And so, see here here you can see the mercury coming, right? So, and then of course one of the worst things is to have somebody drill on your teeth, or when you go to the dentist's office and they begin to clean your teeth and they're polishing in there, you have huge amounts of, well, look at that, all that mercury coming right off your fillings. So one of the problems with teeth is that if you have mercury fillings, you're getting poisoned with the mercury. But there's another problem, and that is that here you see a mercury filling, and dentists traditionally remove at least a third, and then you can see in this tooth all over a half of the tooth with what are called undercuts, just so that mercury filling won't fall out. So they've removed a large portion of your tooth to put a filling in. Well, eventually the tooth fractures, and usually it goes down the side, and then the dentist will come along and put a crown right on top. So now you have mercury leaking into an open wound, and yet the dentist can never see it because his x-ray won't go through the crown. So he x-rays it and said, "All things look beautiful." Okay? So you've got all of this mercury going into your system underneath there. But the important thing to know is that every tooth is wired into an acupuncture circuit. So whatever happens to that tooth happens to the organs that are on that same circuit. So for example, there are some people who have published that all breast cancers are associated with an infection in one of these teeth. You see this where it says right breast? So it's this upper right molar, or the one of these two molars, or this premolar. On the other side, it's over here. It also, the breast, is these bottom teeth. I've seen one breast cancer in which I couldn't find a dental connection to it. Okay? So almost all women with breast cancer will have infection in these teeth. Okay? So somebody was talking to me earlier about a family member that has pancreatitis. Well, if you got pancreatitis and you've got normal total body voltage, guess what's probably causing the pancreatitis? See where it says pancreas? See where it says pancreas? She got an infection in one of those teeth. That's why her pancreas is flared up. And the reason is that the kind of bug that's able to have lunch on a tooth, of all things, puts out a really severe toxin called gliotoxin or thioether. If it's a bacteria, it's a thioether. If it's a fungus in there, it's called a gliotoxin. So what you see is, well, let's go back to this. This is the problem. You see this crown looks pretty good, and the dentist will say, "Oh, that's a beautiful crown." You say, "Well, yeah, but it kind of aches every once in a while." "Oh, nothing wrong with that tooth. The x-rays look fine," until you take it off. Surprise, what's under there, right? Now, remember, when you go to the dentist and you tell them you want all of the mercury taken out of your mouth, be sure that they give you an air supply, because you saw those fumes coming off, particularly if they're drilling on them. So if the dentist doesn't protect you by giving you an air supply, then as those fumes come out of your own mouth, they'll go into your nose and into your brain, and you'll come out of there feeling terrible, and it's a hard problem getting mercury out of your brain. So don't do that. Don't allow a dentist to be grinding on a silver filling without giving you an air supply. And I like to even put those little cotton balls in there, so I'm sure it's not going to have any of that mercury go up my nose and into my brain. And you want them to use what's called a rubber dam. A rubber dam is just a sheet of plastic that they poke a tooth through, so that any pieces that fall down are captured by this and you don't swallow them. So before you have any dental work, call your dentist's office and say, "When you work on my teeth, will you give me an air supply and use a rubber dam?" And if they say, "Oh, that's not important," go find another dentist. Okay? Now, a root canal is one of the worst things of all, because a root canal is a dead tooth. The way you do a root canal is you drill a hole in the top here, you put this auger down, and you rip the artery and nerve out and kill the tooth. The dentists are the only physicians who purposely leave dead tissue in the body, because everybody knows that dead tissue gets infected. So if your big toe dies and I don't amputate it, you're going to die from gangrene, aren't you? If your appendix dies and you don't amputate it, you're going to die from peritonitis. If your tooth dies and you don't amputate it, it just takes longer to do you in, but it will. Here's a study that actually comes from the root canal doctor's own journal, the Journal of Endodontics. And this was a study where they had people who are going to have wisdom teeth pulled. And so they did a root canal on one side and then waited 3 months and then pulled both teeth. Now, molars contain up to 3 miles of these little tubules. You see the little tubules in here? Well, this tooth they didn't do anything to. 1% of the tubules were infected. This one that had a root canal 3 months earlier, 39% of the tubules are infected in just 3 months. Okay? Now, this study was done at the University of Kentucky, and it shows that one root canal tooth shuts down 63% of your immune system. Okay? So one of the worst things you can do is to go around with an abscess in your mouth called a root canal, because you don't feel it because the nerve's not there anymore, right? But it's sitting there putting out these thioethers, shutting down your immune system. So that's why, it does the general immune system, but it'll also take down the voltage in whatever circuit it's in. And that's why oftentimes like I had a woman come in to see me from Carolina, and she had such severe pain in her upper back that she was on OxyContin. She'd been all over the place, had neurologists and MRI scan. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, but she had all this pain, so she came in the OxyContin. And she said, "You've got to do something for me." She said, "I can't stand the pain without it, and I can't function with it." So I looked at where she was hurting, and it was where the perineural system goes out to the lung. So I looked in her mouth, and this tooth right here was discolored and had a huge mercury filling in it. And when I put a voltmeter on it, it was leaking more than 200 millivolts. Well, you shouldn't be leaking more than 30 millivolts out of a tooth. And so I told her that her back pain was coming from that tooth. Well, she thought my cheese had slipped off the cracker and refused to go to the dentist. Well, it took me 3 days to finally convince her to go, and eventually when she went to the dentist, as soon as he put the block in to numb that tooth, the back pain was gone. He took the filling out, cleaned out the infection, put a different, a new filling back in that wasn't mercury, and that was the end of her back pain. So a lot of back pain comes from having a dental problem. And you see the same thing with almost every other illness. People come in with Crohn's disease. Well, it's because they got a tooth in the intestinal meridian. They come in with heart problems. Well, they got infection in the same area. So basically, I have personal experience with this. When I was sick, I had a bleeding disorder. My platelet count was running 40,000. It should be around 150 to 350,000. And I had a root canal in my spleen meridian, this number 14 right here. So my spleen was killing all my platelets because of the root canal right here. Well, one of the interesting things is that one of the things, remember, that I couldn't do is think. Remember, I had only 2 or 3 hours a day in which I could think clearly, because my brain was running at 2 millivolts instead of 25. Well, the spleen meridian takes voltage to the brain. So 48 hours after I had this tooth pulled, my bleeding problem was cured. My platelet count went back to 150,000 in 48 hours. And my brain started working again. Well, my kids sometimes and my staff argue about whether that's really true, but at least I'm working better than I used to. So the point is that a single tooth can take you down. A single root canal put me in bed for 7 years. Okay? So I can't overemphasize to you how important I think dental infections are, because probably almost everybody who comes to see me in my office has been sick for 5 or 10 years and can't figure out how to get well. And about 70% of the people who walk in my door, they're sick because of their teeth. And so the teeth is something you really have to pay attention to. And so the real problem is finding a dentist who understands this stuff, because they don't teach this in dental school. And so It's hard to find a dentist who knows anything at all about acupuncture. Now, here's, I don't know if you can see, if the lights are dim enough you can see this or not, but I hope so. This used to be a root canal in here. And you see all of this infected bone. A problem with leaving a root canal in your mouth very long is that the infection in the tooth pretty soon walks its way out into the bone. And once you get infection in the bone, it's really much harder to get rid of because you can't just pull the tooth. You got to go out and clean out all of that infected bone in your jaw. And that's an even bigger job, and then it tends to come back. So it's a hard thing to do. So the longer you wait before getting your root canals all out, the more difficult it's going to be to get it fixed. Here you can see some of how the infection has gone out and just spread through the jaw. Now this is George Meinig. Dr. Meinig is the dentist who invented the root canal procedure, and he spent most of the last years of his career trying to get dentists to quit doing them. And he wrote this book called Root Canal Cover-Up. So if you want to know more about what I've been telling you about, you can get Dr. Meinig's book from Amazon or other similar places. Well, I think I probably talked longer than I was supposed to. I apologize if I kept you too long. What I've tried to tell you is that that getting sick is about losing voltage, and getting well is about regaining our voltage so we have enough electrons to build new cells. And of course we have to have the raw materials to build those new cells, and that's where nutrition comes in. And you have to get rid of the toxins that are hanging around, because if you're loaded up with toxins, then when you build a new cell, those toxins just poison that cell as well. So getting well is a combination of fixing your voltage, to doing good nutrition, which is getting harder and harder to do because of our food supply, and detoxing. And the thing that's so nice is that we now have a way to measure your voltage and know what's going on. You know, when you try to do things without measuring, then you're flying by the seat of your pants. So, you know, I love to use the biomodulator because I can measure with it. I love to use it to put electrons in. Sometimes I use essential oils. Sometimes I use homeopathics. Sometimes I use the Tesla lights. Sometimes there are all sorts of stuff that I use, and because anything that will donate electrons has the potential of solving the problem. If if you've got a 90-year-old whose total body voltage is 25 and doesn't have any, very many, all the other circuits are all right except just a couple of teeth, they'll be fine because they've got enough voltage to deal with it, right?
So your normal voltage is what, like a
20 to 25.
25?
So, but if you've got a 40-year-old whose total body voltage is 5, that person's going to have, you have to worry about that person having a problem having their tooth pulled or anything else done. Because if you go in and start killing bugs in that person, for example, there's a product I love called MMS, or sodium chloride, because it'll kill any virus, bacteria, anything you can think of, it'll kill it shortly. But if you give that to somebody who's got a total body voltage of 5, you'll put them in bed because they can't deal with all those dead bugs. Right? Same thing would happen if I gave the wrong homeopathic to that person. If they got a total body voltage of 5 and I start doing detox stuff with homeopathics, I'll put them in bed. So that's why I want to know before I start, what's this patient's voltage, because then I know how sick they are and how fast I can get them well. Because you can't start asking the body to clean up stuff if it's got 5 millivolts. It just can't handle it, right? That's a problem. You know, somebody, let's say that you're feeling bad and your cells are saying, I need more food down here, and so you start eating something and your digestion, your GI tract is running at 7 millivolts. It looks up at you and says, what do you think? I'm running at 7 millivolts and you're dumping all of this stuff down here you want me to deal with? And what's it going to do? It's going to throw it right back up at you, right? You understand what I just said? You're going to throw up. Because the stomach says, 7 millivolts, I can't deal with this stuff. Back it goes. So by knowing what the voltage is, you know what you can do. Make sense? It's all about the voltage. Any other questions?
What about the alkaline water?
Well, alkaline water is, by definition, water that is an electron donor. So if you take most of the water out of the earth, put a voltmeter in it, it has a voltage in it, right? Then you put chlorine and fluoride in it, it becomes an electron stealer. The problem with fluoride, you can't get it back out. The only filters that take it out put other poisons back in. So once the government puts the fluoride in the water, there's really no effective way to get it back out. So the best you can do for that is to take enough iodine so your body will help dump it out, and just try not to take more of it in than you have to. So, but what you want from water is you want it to be clean. You don't want to have bugs and dirt and stuff in it, and you don't want it to have toxins in it, and you want it to have electrons. You want it to be an electron donor. Now, the easiest way to get water that's acceptable, in my opinion, is to use one of the ionic machines. And there are several of those. Most all of them are made in the same basic way. There are people here I saw that are displaying one brand of them. It's an MLM company, and they're about $4 grand. You can get an almost identical machine for about $1,000 from another company called Jupiter, and that's the one I use because it's so much less expensive, and I've tested the water. I've tested all the forms of the water: the voltage, the oxidative content. I've taken old machines, old Jupiter machines that have been around for a while, taken their water and sent them off to toxicology labs. There's no toxins in them, despite what some people claim. And so I'm perfectly content to spend 25% as much money for the same thing. So I use that device, and you can dial in whatever voltage you want.